Good morning. This is James Richard on January 15th. And I hope you all had a great evening and slept well last night. Today, I want to see if there are questions from anything that was discussed yesterday, the day before, or anything that has become that you have become aware of in relationship to your life or the life of humanity. Are there questions? Please raise them now.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Pastor, I remember somebody asked you last weekend about the new Congress, and they wanted you to answer on Monday, but you weren't on Monday.
Oh, okay. Um, I think there was Lamont asking about Kevin McCarthy and taking over the Congress. We have talked about how things must be revealed before they can be dealt with. And that revelation must come to the people who are involved in this earth. And the reason is because unless there is misery or unless there is some type of adverse experience, people don't have a tendency to desire much of anything other than the status quo. Well, this is a part of what's being revealed. What's being revealed now by virtue of Kevin McCarthy and being elected Speaker, how desperate the powers that be are for power, and the ends that they will go to in order to maintain power. And that does not only show us only what the Republicans are doing. It's power brokers, period. What we are begun to see is that there is no difference between the hunger for power and the manipulation of power. There's no difference between the Democrats or the Republicans. I suppose there is one difference maybe, and that is that they go after it differently. But both of them want the same thing. So right now, we are seeing a house that simply does what it wants to do without any efforts to appease anyone of color, period. And we have the Senate, who is also power hungry, but it uses the method of appeasement to make people feel like they are part of the decisions that's made and the decisions are on their behalf. And of course, there are those of you on this phone who would say that there's a greater difference in that. However, let me give you an example before I continue. In that Inflation Reduction Bill, I spoke to you a few weeks ago about how one of the policies in that bill speaks to the income tax for people who are low income, and the way it does it is if you send your child $600 through PayPal or one of the other cash apps, what you find is that at the end of the year, you are going to have to prove that it was not income, or you're going to have to pay taxes on it. One of the other things is that they're touting how much they have lowered the price of medications, when in essence it's 2025 or 26 before it actually comes into effect. So this is appeasement on paper and nothing in reality that's being offered. So there is no difference between the two. So this exposure is beginning of the end to the foundational structure of this country. And because the foundational structure of this country was built on appeasement on paper and non-appeasement, period. And both of them are arrogant. One, arrogance of appeasement on paper, says that you're too stupid to know what's going on. The other arrogance says it's in your face and there's nothing you can do about it, even if you know. So that's where we are when with this new Congress. There are a couple other things I want to say, but before I do that, are there any questions, or is it just clear with you? Audrey? Okay, Nick. Okay. So, so here we are with this foundational structure being destroyed. Another example of that is this: we talk about the reforming of law enforcement, and of course, Kevin McCarthy does not believe it needs to be reformed. Democrats are talking about reforming it, but it's never reformed. Why? The system of law enforcement, policing in America, the system is not broken. The system has never been broken, but it will be. It will be destroyed. The system is functioning exactly the way it was designed to function. And it is it's just as much of a misnomer to say it's broken as it is to say that we are a democracy. And I don't really, the democracy thing, we can get into that and see how democracies always end up being dictatorships, but we can talk about that later. I don't know whether Lamont is on or not, but does that answer your question, Lamont? And for the rest of you, of course, I know that you are very much aware of the question he raised, and I'm simply asking, I suppose, all of you, does that response answer the question? Audrey?
Yes, that gives some insight, for me anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a question, Pastor.
Thank you.
And so what happened with Biden and the papers also go back to the fact that there's little difference between the two parties.
Absolutely.
The motive might be a little different, but the outcome can be the same.
You know what, Barbara? I'm not even sure the motive is different. I think the motive is presented as being different. I also believe that this has been happening all the time. And the reason it came to light with Biden is because it was brought to light with Trump. And Trump was so arrogant about it until he forced it into the light. And this with Biden, these are all the papers we have. We searched everything, blah blah blah, and here we are again. Every time that they say that all of it has been recovered, we find more. So I do not think that is a coincidental event. I believe that it has been happening, and I do not doubt for a second that the use of the intelligence has not been used for businesses as well as for personal gain. I'm not even sure about that. That's it, you know. I mean, keep in mind what we're dealing with, the type of attitudes that we're dealing with. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Anyone else? Okay. Are there any other questions about anything else?
Hey, this is Nick. I wanted to know if we don't have a direction set by our questioning, whether you want to continue with a question you asked me last week about dealing with the nature of what we read as heaven and hell, as described in the New Testament, because I can
Yes.
continue in that direction.
Sure. Do you have any insight?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. And I want to preface this by, if you were not on the phone last week, this is something that came up during our discussion. But I wanted to continue with that, and it is a deeper look into the nature of heaven and hell as it is described in the New Testament. And of course, as you are probably aware of from being on these calls, it is certainly not the literally interpreted thing that is presented in the dogmatic religious setting of Christianity. And I wanted to address that and move forward from there. So, depending on which translation of the Bible you're looking at, there are not actually that many mentions of hell in the New Testament. And you may wonder why almost the entire modern sort of religious institution of Christianity bases what it does and what it believes around this concept that is not even mentioned that many times. But the reason that the sort of literally interpreted vision of what that is given to us from the religion of Christianity was completely distorted and purposely manipulated and used for the express purpose of controlling the way people think and attempting to gather up as much attention, and that translates to resources, money, and power to itself, the church, that is, in attempting to gather as much material wealth as possible, as much material influence and power as possible. The idea that they promoted, that hell is some eternal punishment, was very useful to them. And that is not what is in the New Testament or any of the other books that are not included in the sort of official quote unquote Bible that is given to us by any form of Christianity, for the most part. As it is said in the, I believe, the King James Version, it is said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you." And in the New American Standard Version, it's translated slightly differently, where it says, "The kingdom of God is in your midst," or is amongst you. But it's the same idea. That concept is incompatible with the nature of the concept of hell as put forward by sort of religious modern Christianity. If the kingdom of heaven is within you, if the kingdom of God is amongst you or in your midst or present now, so too must whatever the experience of hell is. The literal interpretation that is given to us by Christianity is a very distorted, negative idea. And it is, as I'm sure we all know, the source of a lot of anxiety, fear, etc. in the people who sit in church and internalize this concept. To promote this concept, as most of Christianity does, means that it is a source of fear, terror, etc., rather than a source of spiritual insight and reality. And I'm sure we're all aware of that at this point. But I wanted to go into these concepts a bit more to help break some of the psychic hold that fear may still have on any of us in here. Because it is not something that is part of reality. There is no eternal punishment, as the church has described and defined it. That concept is wholly against the nature of reality itself and the nature of the source of all that is, called the Creator. So before I go any further, are there any questions or anything based on what I've said so far, or this direction I want to go in?
Nope.
Okay. So,
Nick,
oh,
I don't
sure.
know, it's not exactly a question regarding this, but sometimes I think it's worth a discussion or at least a mention of, and I'm not even sure where it's mentioned outside of the church, purgatory, and perhaps, to me anyway, the translation of that into the whole idea of the chakras, maybe as represented in Revelation or not, because that's always seen as an in-between place. And Robin Williams made that wonderful movie, I thought, called Field of Dreams, where his wife committed suicide and he said he's going to go find her and pull her out of purgatory because otherwise she would spend eternity there. But that whole notion of in between, and the church, I guess, at least saying, or whatever, that it's not like you're just sitting there till you figure it out. It's a state of confusion. So how do you break out of the confusion? Just that whole discussion, maybe not, but it might be an interesting element, because we're always talking about heaven and hell. But for those who are unsure, doesn't that bode something in between? So that's all.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That's a good place to start. Let me just say that Robin Williams movie was What Dreams May Come. Not Field of Dreams, but they're probably on the same spectrum. What Dreams May Come, pretty good movie, and that movie has more truth in it than you have ever received in any sort of sitting in church listening to somebody tell you you're going to go to hell. I'm not kidding. If you have not seen that movie, I highly recommend it. That movie, the Cuba Gooding Jr. says the line, "Thoughts are real," in that movie, and that will tell you more about heaven and hell than any somebody yelling at you. First, the concept of purgatory is exactly what comes out of spiritual ignorance. So as a result of spiritual ignorance, you attempt to use your intellect to fill the gap or fill the space. And you have to intellectualize all of the little details that you come across in order to get them to fit into whatever concept or worldview or framework you are trying to get them to fit into. So the concept of purgatory is one such intellectualized thing. There is no purgatory in the Bible. Spiritually speaking, there is no purgatory concept. and that relates to there's no sort of you get sent, quote unquote, to punishment, or you get sent, quote unquote, to reward after death. These are all attempts to come up with something that makes sense to you intellectually out of a result of spiritual ignorance.
Nick,
Yes, sir.
speaking of purgatory, when the Catholics began to spread, Catholicism began to spread in Europe. Purgatory was a fundraiser for the Catholic Church. At its onset, it became a fundraiser because they were having problems raising money to construct the buildings they wanted and to line the coffers of the Catholic Church. And purgatory came from a group of bishops along with the priests coming up with the concept to raise more money. It was that in the beginning, and then it grew into a pseudo-spiritual concept. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. And let me just say, in the beginning, in the early days of Christianity, this idea of eternal punishment was not even something that was as strongly believed as it is now. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But if that's as strange that might sound, there was that concept, but it was considered something not as big a deal in a lot of ways, because if you were connected to the church, there was a lot of things you could do. For example, purchasing of indulgences, which was you could basically buy a little ticket that said, okay, your sins are forgiven. And that includes the concept of purgatory and how all those things were used as a way for the church to expand its power and influence.
Question.
Yes.
Does that concept of purgatory come from, remember the story about the rich man, poor man, one died and went to Sheol or something, and he wished that he could come back and tell everybody to be good or whatever, so they would go to heaven. Is that where that concept comes from?
It may, but I don't think so, because the word translated as hell is sometimes Sheol. And what the church did is basically take all the words that were used, Sheol, Hades, Tartarus, Gehenna, and translate them to one thing and one concept. And all those concepts are related, but the church did not sort of accept any nuance related to that.
Relating to Audrey's question, as you said, it had absolutely nothing to do with hell or the scriptures, period. It was no different than the church sitting down saying that we're going to have Resurrection Sunday, and I want everyone to pay $50 for Resurrection Sunday. Where did that come from? It came from the depths of greed in the hearts of men, and that's where the purgatory came from, in order to increase the income of the church. That concept was introduced with no justifications of it from the scriptures at all. The only justification was that the Pope said it. That's it. Thank you.
I have a question. This is Rania. I was wondering, because, there are other faiths. I'm thinking of Hinduism right now, but Buddhism, and that talk about reincarnation. And I don't know if the Bible says anything about that. I was also thinking of The Good Place, which I thought was a really good series that attempted to look at life after death, or even life and living in a different way from our Judeo-Christian kind of background. I don't know if you have any thoughts there or insight there, Nick, on just kind of how we create our own heavens or hells. And because one of the concepts of reincarnation is you have to keep living through these lessons, right? You know, that you don't get until you get it. So that's my question.
Thank you. Reincarnation is a fundamental spiritual concept present also in Christianity before it was called that. In the mystical spiritual tradition out of which early Christians came, this would have been something that was discussed, and it is hinted at in various places in the Bible, in those books of the Bible that they excluded from the current version that is presented by Christianity. There are more clues as to the fact that that is a real thing. And as he said, the hells and heavens that we create, we are very much responsible for creating the nature of the experience that is either heavenly or hellish internally, and then externally as a result of our own sort of projection of what is inside of us. And that happens to some extent in all realms of reality that we will experience. Definitely this physical one, it's very easy to see how we can create chaos. It also happens in those other realms that we will pass through as we go through the quote afterlife cycle before making another return to this physical experience, should we have need of it. And I will get into that.
Nick,
Mhm.
you said Rainia's question was included the idea of whether or not it was in the scriptures. The word reincarnation in relationship to people is not, however, the scripture does give us proof that it speaks of it when Jesus says, "Who do men say that I am?" And the response was, some say that you are Isaiah, and some say that you are Elijah, etc. That in itself was speaking of the idea of the concept of reincarnation, and there were no challenges to that. So what I'm saying in essence is there was a recognition of the reality of reincarnation long before the bishop decided it wasn't. So that was real, as you said, long before this concept of spirituality was called Christianity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pastor. That verse reminded me to, now that you mention it, I remember when I first read it going, what? The other thing I wanted to mention was I was at my hairdresser yesterday, who's still very much in the, normal Christian faith. And we were talking about, we were watching this documentary because it was a long appointment, about, how fishing, how farm fishing is destroying the ecosystem of the ocean, and we are, by creating a dumping ground and blah, blah, blah. And at one point, because we were talking about, well, we should make some changes in our lives. And then she said, well, it is for now till Jesus comes back. And there's that thought that, yeah, well, Jesus will come back and it'll go away anyway. And that's the thing I feel like Christianity teaches is we don't have to worry about fixing the earth because Jesus is going to come back anyway and create this new heaven on earth. And my response to her was, well, it would be nice if when Jesus came back, we had already gotten ourselves together and he could go, good job, y'all, for creating heaven on earth. Good job for taking care of this planet instead of waiting on him to fix it. But anyway, it just feels like that becomes part of the why I don't need to do anything, the apathy, that we have.
Great response, Rainier.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. And it's like there are many, many concepts that relate to how the sort of European interpretation of reality has distorted original spiritual concepts, including the sort of completely linear concept of time, and the sort of puritanical, sort of American version of spirituality, or of religion rather, where the idea of our experience in the earth has no meaning other than to make sure you go to heaven or to hell. And if you're rich, it's a sign that you're doing well and that God, you're going to get into heaven. You're messing up, and it's your fault. These are all concepts that were introduced by the sort of intellectualization of the original spiritual concepts, and the intellectualization of those concepts mixed with the desire to maintain dominance over whatever else you wanted to maintain dominance over. These are all sort of distorted concepts that have been passed through the lens of ego and forced through the funnel of intellect, and they've are regressions or sort of backwards movements of spiritual evolution. Forwards movement, progressive spiritual evolution, is not a forcing of anything into any framework. It is a learning how to expand your own framework. It is a learning how to expand your own capacity to be aware of what is already, and not an attempt to fit anything into anything else. And this whole concept of intellectualizing spiritual concepts, which is what produces religion, is what has to be dissolved in order for humanity to come to an understanding of who and what it is. Originally, before, out of ignorance, our attempts to intellectualize these concepts came into play. So, as we mentioned, the ideas of heaven and hell that are presented by religiousness are themselves not connected to the spiritual concepts that they are. So how is it that you can grasp, well, maybe grasp is not a good word, how is it that you can become aware of reality as opposed to needing to intellectualize everything that you see? That is through essentially meditation, and what that actually means. And quite simply, that is simply learning to be still so that you can become aware of what is already present in yourself, present in your environment, present in reality. It is through the use of simply a clear and aware conscious awareness, and through the use of consciousness itself, which is our interface with reality, that we can become aware of what is present in reality. And we don't have to rely on our sort of attempts to make sense of things out of our intellect. The intellect is a useful tool. It is not our sort of first, like how in journalism they say first-hand, second-hand source. Our first-hand source of anything is our conscious awareness itself. And that is spirit. That is our connection to this experience of reality and where we go in order to find the truth, capital T, concerning the nature of whatever it is we encounter. And that is where you have to go in order to find the truth of the experiences that are being spoken about when we talk about the spiritual concepts of heaven and hell. And they are real experiences, as I've said before. There are definitely hellish things to experience, definitely heavenly things to experience, in more than just this sort of physical material plane that we are currently occupying or present on. However, just like in that movie, What Dreams May Come, that we mentioned earlier, it is the nature of the thoughts and internal environment that we learn to cultivate within ourselves that plays a large role in producing the kinds of experiences that we might call heavenly or hellish. And that occurs here in the physical, as we all know, and that occurs in other realms that we will pass through when we exit this physical experience and transition out of this material plane that we are currently on. There's probably a few books that I can mention that I think do good jobs of, I think, explaining this concept. But quite basically, I think if you expect to see heaven, if you expect to see hell, when you make your transition, you will encounter that experience in some way that you have created for yourself in your own future. Both of those experiences are in some ways illusions. And during the process of what happens after you make your transition, you will learn that that illusion is exactly that. And it will give way to reality that exists already. And therein is a little bit of an amazing sort of paradox. Hell, in the way that we've been taught it exists by the Christian church, does not exist. But heaven kind of does. And that has to do with the fundamental nature of reality being one of unity, connectedness, awareness across all planes of existence. And there are many metaphysical, spiritual concepts that are involved even in, I forget who mentioned like when the rich man went to Sheol and he wanted to tell people, oh, don't be like me, to do better or whatever. There are many metaphysical, spiritual concepts that go into these seeming simple lines that we see in the Bible, because what is Sheol? How can you speak to someone from Sheol? What is Hades? How can you see or learn about the shades that wander Hades, etc.? These are all concepts that arise from people's own experiences with the other planes of existence, which are spoken about much more clearly in other sort of metaphysical, occult, etc. Teachings, and are more difficult to see in the Bible because of what we talked about, because of how it's been curated for us in order to produce a certain rigid belief system. So when we see things like Sheol, Hades, etc., these concepts are connected to real experiences in other planes of this reality. None of which.
What do you mean the other planes of this reality? Please explain that. Thank you.
Sure. So we currently experience this material physical plane. And plane, I'm sure you've heard in reference to the term astral plane, if you have heard or familiar with that. But these are, again, sort of foundational, spiritual, and metaphysical concepts. Plane, or sort of experience of reality, just refers to wherever we are in the, for lack of a better term, maybe hierarchy of reality itself, in the way it has been expressed or constructed, and its source or core is in the creator itself. So all of these, quote, planes or levels or different realms that we can experience are, let's say, degrees of projection outwards from the creator. And when we make our transition, we basically return back to where we have come from, and we encounter all kinds of other experiences, but it is a way of describing, when we say plane or this material physical experience, it is a way of describing the way in which spirit is experienced at a particular level, for lack of a better term, of spiritual development, at a particular level, for lack of a better term, of separation from the creator, or perceived separation from the creator.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So Nick, you're saying, or maybe my perception of what you're saying is that we all have our own, we all have certain beliefs. For example, the Buddhists who do believe in reincarnation. We all, as Elohim, even if we don't realize that we are Elohim, we are creators, and we create what we, our thoughts create what we believe. So for them, they have a belief in reincarnation that for quote unquote Christians, they don't. So you're saying when we transition from this plane to whatever the next one is, and I like your terminology of saying we have to go through that funnel of whatever it is that we created. We have to sort of go through that funnel of our own creation and sort of in a way to correct
Yes.
whatever we need to correct. But eventually we come out on the other side in a fuller experience of the creator.
Yes, and a more direct interface with the structure of reality itself as set in place by its source, the creator.
Okay, I got it.
So think of like the creator creates the walls and the structure of the house. Whatever you put in it is up to you. But at some point you must recognize that it is a house and that it has a source, and that source is similar. It's like light passes through a prism and creates a rainbow, creates many colors. There's no correct color. But if you trace the path of light, it returns to the same source and it begins to look more similar.
I like that. Yeah.
Here in the physical material experience, there's infinite colors because it has been passed through infinite, or I mean, there's impossible to quantify. That's outside of the realm of counting. The ways in which you can make variations of what it is possible to experience. But when you pass out of this physical experience and return and draw closer to the source of all things, it becomes more similar. And yet you still maintain your individual experience. So as I mentioned, or just the example I gave of the structure of reality, so these planes, for lack of a better term, that we will experience and do right now as on the material physical plane are like the walls, are like the studs, like the bones, quote unquote, of a house. Your sort of personal beliefs form the way you decorate that house, to continue that analogy. When the Hindu, the righteous Hindu man who knows he's lived a righteous life, dies, he goes to Hindu heaven. Same thing with any other religious practice. But at some point during that afterlife, quote unquote, experience, there must be a measuring of your own beliefs against what reality is already. The extent to which they match up or don't match up is the amount of sort of disillusionment process that you must go through. So if you have this rigid belief about what you will or will not experience, you will or will not experience, or you will experience whatever it is you believe. But even while experiencing it, there will become opportunities to recognize that what you are experiencing is something that you have created and is, to some degree, not in line with the structure of reality itself, if that makes sense.
So our thoughts, which live on after we transition, are what we have to work our way through, and that is what is perceived as either heaven or hell.
Our thoughts.
I have
Oh, go ahead.
I was saying I have a quick comment on that. More accurately, the belief system for which, in a sense, we hold on tightly. And it is through that prism of our beliefs that we have the opportunity for reality to unfold itself. Kind of like, say, for just as an example, someone who is super religious and buys into the heaven and hell concept with Peter, etc., might more than likely grow through a situation like that, only in a sense to reach them so that they could have an opportunity or chance to accept it. However, the truer reality which Nick is speaking about will then, in a sense, be unfolding or unfold at the same time. But it is because of their belief that they're supposed to go and meet Peter, etc., that this plays out in a sense. But it's only because of their beliefs that they hold on tightly to.
Yeah, that's what I mean. We have to kind of, after we transition, we have to kind of work our way through whatever our thoughts created about heaven or hell to get to the other side, so to speak.
Yes, and thank you, Sheldon. I believe that that is correct. But it's not necessarily that whatever it is you think you will experience, it is what you have sort of cultivated in your subconscious, you will in some way be immersed in. And that's part of the quote afterlife experience, is learning how to work through that stuff. And this does not happen on your own. You have helpers, you have other beings who are in place in order to help you do this. This is not something that anyone goes through alone in any sense, not in the physical experience, not in other realms of reality. Yes.
Nick, is this like the story I think you sent me, or we were talking about this, and I forgot the name of it, but it was kind of this idea that the levels of heaven or whatever, the levels of the afterlife, where the person who believes a certain thing goes to that hell or that heaven, as their consciousness returns to oneness. Almost, you kind of work your way up these levels of heaven, or so it reminds me. I thought it was you and I who talked about that.
I forget the name of that story. It might have been. That sounds like something I've read, but that is very much, I think, a description of how that works. And I don't mean to say that this is the only thing that is present, but a part of the experience that you will have when you make the transition is learning how to work through whatever it is you've built up within yourself. There is still that superstructure, that fundamental structure of reality that you will encounter, that has been set and kept in place by the influence of greater beings than we, shall we say, and ultimately the creator itself. So there are planes, etc., where on you will have certain experiences that have been present for infinite amounts of time that we learn how to adapt to. And the way we adapt, or our experience of adapting to these other planes of reality, is influenced by our own beliefs and what we have built up within ourselves, if that makes sense. So it's a little bit of both. It's like a blending of our own beliefs with the nature of reality as it exists. But it is.
Nick,
Mhm.
are you when we talk about this exit from the body and entering this other reality, a reality that is actually available to us prior to exiting the body,
Yep.
if we are searching for it. That is all because we have to see the thing that kept our focus on the material world as to understand, as opposed to understanding that we came from divinity, therefore we are divine, and we return to the same divinity. However, if we believe that we've been so bad in this earth that we are going to enter this place called hell, and once we exit the body, that's what we are actually looking for until we are shown that those things that we were told to expect as a result of our exit in the body do not exist at all. But what I have been looking at is that the foundation of every I use religion very loosely, okay? The foundation of everything that we call religion today is exactly the same when it comes to the belief in the divinity of the occupants of these bodies. Yet, the foundations are left behind, and the intellectual desires of men put build on these foundations, as opposed to allowing allowing spirituality to guide them or guide us, so that the foundation is never abandoned. It is always true to what it was supposed to be from the beginning. Am I seeing this correctly? Because, for example, you see that the Hebrew believes the same thing as does the Brahmin. When it comes to, for example, what Brahmin says, man's inner self is one with the self of the universe, and to the universe and to that unity it must return in the fullness of time, which means that it's simply saying man is divine. Hebrew man came into being through emanation from the will of the king, therefore is divine. Even Zoroastrianism, man is a spark of the universal flame to be ultimately united with this source. All of those and others are saying exactly the same thing, only using different ways of stating it. So my question is, am I seeing this correctly when I see that that exiting the body simply means that we have to be reminded or reunited with the reality of what the foundational beliefs are supposed to be, so that we can be purged of what we have been inundated with while we were in this earth? Does that make sense?
Yes,
Or
absolutely. It's like we sleep and wake up while we're here. What happens when we exit the body is just a deeper form of sleep, and we
Okay.
awake again in another body if we have need of it, is I think that another way to say that. But yes, And I want to thank you for bringing that up. And I know we spoke about it a lot, everyone on the phone. If you have any questions, don't feel or don't hesitate to let us know. But you mentioned, Pastor Richard, that what we will experience when we exit the body is accessible to us now. And that is also extremely correct. We don't have to wait for what that is, because what that is not distant from us. It's not somewhere out there. And it is not a place that we travel to, quote unquote. It is the nature of reality that we are able to perceive based on our own spiritual development.
I would like to see if I can carry that a step further in terms of understanding that.
Mm-hmm.
The accessibility of it, if we were to genuinely seek to and accept and access it now, then we don't have to die. If Enoch, the story of Enoch speaks to us about being able to access the reality of what our spiritual nature and divine nature is. When that happens, then we simply exit the body, and as shown through the story of this concept of Jesus, if you exit the body based upon what you have learned about your connection to the divine, then you can also reconstitute that same body and re-enter the ranks of mankind. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So death is an adhesion to the ego. Our ego tells us when we allow the ego to control, then the ego guides us into those selfish things that we desire, or ego blinds us to the nature of our selfishness, and it tells us that we are spiritual when indeed we are searchers for those things that would enhance us in a physical, material way. And as a result of that, we actually pushes the body away from us. And death is simply exiting the body. So we actually pushes it away from us because of ego, and that's what we call death, because we exited that body. However, if we embrace the spiritual reality that we were created to be, and we truly, truly see it, then there is no pushing the body away. We simply walk away from it as easily as the sages say, as easily as the hair is extracted from milk. Does that make sense?
Yes. Everyone on the phone, I'm gonna need questions. Let's pause right there because we said a lot.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
My question is, when Jesus died, when he went to the grave, or however you say it, he had to go. He went in the lower part of the earth in Sheol to bring the ones that didn't see him or understand out of Sheol. Okay, give me an understanding of that.
You want to do that, Nick, or me?
Oh, well, I'll say what I wanted to say, and then you can continue.
Okay.
The awareness that brings salvation, let's say, ministers to all planes of reality and to all modes of existence that spirit may find itself in, including that which is referred to by Sheol, or the grave. which is, let's say, quite simply, like a lower, quote unquote, astral plane. So when you stereotypically think of things like ghosts or people seeing things like that, that's sort of a general way to think of what is being described by Sheol. It is just a plane that you may experience, or that people may experience during the afterlife process. And that's like a general way to think of that, I think. Anyway, I'm done.
Okay, thanks. Help me to expand on this, if you will. When you talk about Jesus having gone into Sheol to liberate or to free the saints who had exited those bodies before him, you are the Jesus who goes into the depths of Sheol, who goes into the depths of you, the inner self. And going into the depths of inner self means that you are the Christ that does an inventory of your shortcomings, and you redeem those gracious things, those holy, those divine attributes. You redeem them. You meaning that you raise them above the elements of anything that has taught you that you're not divine. You raise your sense of divinity above all of those things that you have believed you had to wait until you died to receive. This whole concept of Jesus is a concept that is in existence as you live in this earth. Once you exit this body, there is no Jesus to be found. If you don't see it now while you are in this body, you don't see it in the other plane or in the other space of spirituality. Why? Because the only reason that the allegory of Jesus is told is for us to understand how we deal with ourselves internally to be able to see how we have damaged ourselves by lowering the aspects of spirituality and divinity into the places beneath our conscious desires. When we see the difference in the two, what happens is we begin to raise the divine essence of our being above our conscious material desires. And it's at that point that the saints are said to be brought out of Sheol by Jesus after his crucifixion. And the crucifixion is actually you crucifying or you separating yourself from those things that are not beneficial to you or to humanity. And I don't know exactly how clear that is to you, but I would be most appreciative if I could get some aid if that needs further explanation. Charles, Nick, somebody.
Yep.
That's clear. That's
Okay.
clear.
So, and let me add on to that, the planes of reality are planes of the ultimate self. They are planes of the self. And the ultimate nature of the ultimate self is the creator. So here in the material physical, in Sheol, the experience that has been spoken about by that, wherever, it doesn't matter. These are all aspects of the ultimate unity, the ultimate self, which is the creator. And we are aspects of the creator operating within a particular layer of the creator's own sense of being. all planes and experiences of reality are themselves part of that greater structure of the being of the creator. They are part of that ultimate nature of the self of the creator itself.
Say that last word, the last verse again you just said.
All planes of reality or experiences that we will have spiritually, etc., are part of the overall structure of the being of the creator. They are all aspects of the ultimate self, which is the creator. And I hope I got that.
Yeah, I got it. I have one more question. If a person is talking to you and you talking to them, and you tell them, you know, you need to be saved or you need to come in, and you won't go through the hellish problem that you have, then the person tell you that I'm living in hell already. And I used to hear, if you're living in hell, then if you're living here in hell, and then you go, be in the same place. So give me an understanding of what's been said there.
And well, that reveals the truth concerning the nature of what hell is as an experience that is accessible to us right now. And we are here in this sort of material experience to learn how to deal with what creates a hellish experience and to stop recreating it in our own internal selves, in our environment, and amongst each other, etc. So it is true, like if you experience something hellish now and you make your transition, you will in some way confront what it is you've created, and also confront the reasons for it being present in your experience. But it is not something that you are condemned to by any means whatsoever. It is simply another way of looking at the nature of the experience that you have sort of created for yourself, that you have encountered. And there are helpers to help you do that as well. Although we have to be willing to accept help in other realms, in other planes of reality, and also on this one. Otherwise, it's a more difficult process. But it is not something anyone is condemned to by any means whatsoever.
May
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I want to take that a step further, if I may, because it makes so much sense what you just said. I've asked myself long before I was brave enough to speak it publicly, if the one who created us, if God is so good, then why would God create a place to punish us throughout eternity when we are told that we are to forgive? Yet, if you create a place to punish somebody forever, then where's your forgiveness?
Yes.
You're supposed to be the one who just condemned me for not being forgiven. That never made sense to me. But of course, like most of us on this phone, at the time that I was questioning those things, I was not in a place where I felt very comfortable us talking about it, because all of us know what would happen with that. So I want us to remember that the scripture says, if you know to give your child bread when he's hungry instead of a stone, what more would your Father do for you who's in heaven? Which means that if that is true, then there is no way possible for the one who created us to send us to a place of eternal damnation without the possibility of ever realizing redemption. That was one of the fear tactics that Catholicism used in order to pull people into their system of belief and manipulation. I'm done. unless there are questions or comments.
Thank you, sir. And let me add on to that. That is our own spiritual instincts immediately pick up how that is incorrect. The instant we hear it. You tell somebody they're going to be punished eternally, and you're wait a minute, that's insane. That's wrong. That sounds wrong. And that is because it is. And that is the danger, that sort of religious colonization of your own spiritual instincts is. It will disconnect you from your own sense of balance and your own internal compass that points you back in the direction of truth, capital T, and reality. Applying 5 seconds of actual thought to that concept makes it seem, makes it make no sense. And I've seen these videos of people traveling from church to church, telling people about their vision of hell and how you, etc. Like applying any thought to that concept makes it make no sense. And I've heard this sort of Christian explanation that, oh, you're not being sent to hell as a punishment. It is rather a place of ultimate separation from the Creator that you deserve when you reject Jesus. That doesn't make any sense either, because of the Creator being all powerful, pervading all reality, has the ability to do anything it wants to at all times. That being could very easily extract you from some situation that you created for yourself. No aspect of it makes any sense, holds up to any sort of just reasoning that we may instinctually have upon hearing that concept. It is pure fear-based colonization of your own mind intended to enslave.
Nick, this is Evelyn. I want you to know, I did believe that when you die, if so to speak, because we were taught that if you did not do this, that, or whatever, you going to hell.
Oh yeah,
That was preached to us 24/7. Yes. And when somebody starts, if you keep getting that message all the time, you're going to believe it. And that's why one of the reasons why I would not read the Bible when I was younger, because I'm like, this is going to happen to me if I don't do this, if I don't walk the straight and narrow, God is going to punish me and blah, 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 whatever. So yeah, I believed it. I believed it all. So, but I did what I wanted to do anyway, but okay, that's all I'm saying.
You start reading the Bible because you were afraid it was going to happen to you, yet you kept doing it anyway. So you ain't believe it no way, right?
Well, yeah, but you just don't tell people don't do something, and then because eventually they're gonna do it. But that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we all believed it to some extent in whatever our situation was. We all believed it. And it takes a lot of soul searching to extract yourself from that thing that was forced on you. And think about that. Everybody does whatever they want anyway, even though they do believe that. And that's been the case for forever. And that's because there is a spiritual instinct that tells you that, no, I'm here to figure myself out and understand things for myself. And I'm not condemned for wanting to do that by any means, by anything whatsoever. Now, in the process of trying to figure yourself out, you will encounter probably negative experiences, but they are the result of our own ignorance and what we have created for ourselves, sort of how we treat each other, etc. Some combination of all of these dynamics between us and other people and our environment. They are not hellish punishments, which is a foreign concept to spirituality itself. There is no arbitrary judge. And the closest thing that helps reveal the nature of all of this is that phrase, "Judge not, lest ye be judged." That is, it's all the self. What we do to ourselves.
I'm gonna ask you
Good
a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that Charles? You want to go first?
Yeah, I go first.
Okay.
I'm gonna ask this question. When Moses went up before, was it? It was either Moses or one.
Oh, Charles, did we lose you?
Charles, we can't hear you.
You might be muted, or we might have lost them. I can't tell.
We may have lost it.
I think so. Yeah, was there another question?
Yes, I have a question. Good morning. This is Kathy. As we are transitioning from the body, when we transition, and you talked about the various planes on which we will now exist. I heard Pastor say if I heard him correctly, the ultimate end, or I don't even want to say ultimate end, but you are moving toward divinity. So my question is about the planes. Can you move about in different planes, like ascending, descending, transcending the different planes, and then what is the ultimate outcome? Where are you headed? I guess is my question, if that makes any sense.
Well, the process of understanding the nature of the self involves these sort of other afterlife planes that we may conventionally think of, as well as this physical experience, and we go back and forth during the process of learning. But there are, shall we say, greater mysteries that we simply wouldn't really be able to comprehend until we're already in that realm. But it is all towards the reconstitution of the ultimate nature of the self. And that is through the individual process and the individual connection and recognition, but also universal. And the reconstitution of the one thing, as it is described in the Kabbalion and the Emerald Tablets. All of this is to facilitate the completion of the fulfillment of what is called the miracle of the one thing, where it is the process of the creator reconstituting itself from the infinite sort of universes that it has created as an expression of itself. It is a back and forth of the creator itself, a breath in and a breath out. Whereas the breath out is the creation. Breath in is the process of the creation figuring itself out and learning to balance itself and returning. It is all headed in the direction of the incomprehensible nature of the being of the creator in absolute knowledge of itself.
Nick,
So
another way to say that in terms of Kathy's question is the understanding for us is that we and the Creator are one. That's the ultimate, that we are one, and that's sort of what Pastor was saying. You don't have to die to understand that, and when you really do understand that, and you act on that, and your thoughts are geared toward that, you don't fear. You don't have to fear anything. Definitely not death, and that's why I think, Pastor, you were saying you don't have to fear it when this body releases you, when you're released from the body, because you're not tied to this material plane. So the ultimate is understanding that you and the Creator are one.
that was going to be my comment, that ultimately what it is you're heading back to unity with the Creator.
Absolutely.
Thank you all. That makes perfect sense. Thank you, all of you, for your input.
Yeah, so
This
I
is
think,
wonderful. This is Star Trek thing that the person was looking for, that this alien, quote unquote, was looking for its creator, and it called its creator Vija. And it was looking for what was called the Voyager, which came from Earth, but it thought but after years and years, the other letters had been excoriated or removed from the ship, and the only thing that was there was VGER. So it was saying that V'Ger was his creator. Well, in a sense, and it was a machine-like thing. So in a sense, that's what we are in search of the creator, but in searching for the creator, once we understand that we are the creator and the creator is us, that's been home. That's heaven. That's oneness. That's unicity. So everything else falls in its place once we understand that.
That when you said that, that's when we understand that, that's heaven. Actually, you're absolutely right in that. Once we understand that, that means spiritual understanding means that you have embraced something in totality. Once that happens, you're absolutely right. That is the ultimate. That is the ultimate. That the ultimate gift of the journey is understanding that we are one with the Creator. We say it all the time. Now, we say that all the time, but we have not embraced it to the extent that we are manifesting it. If we had embraced it to the extent that we are manifesting it, then we would be actually living totally different lives within this body. We would see things totally different than we've ever seen them, and we would embrace them in a way that would change the trajectory of humanity overnight. But at this point, we have not in totality embraced it. It's not that we don't want to. It's that we are learning to. And our learning curve is based upon what we are able not only to put into the macro, but to recover from it as well. Because I am one who also believes that the more we desire to put things in the macro for the benefit of humanity, the universe puts things in the macro for our benefit, so we are able to master the process of not just receiving, but also, not just the process of putting things in the macro, but the process of also receiving from the macro on a continuous basis. And, well, that's something else, but into what I just said. So, does that make sense?
yeah, I wonder, can't we say, this is Richard, can't we say, as we're moving through this life experience, we're changing the reality. It's an amorphous thing. It's not hard lines of us and it. Everything is shifting and changing. It's a very subatomic physics kind of notion, which I like, resonates with me. And this is our, what do you want to say, mission? And so if there's any fundamental element of it to me, it's a phrase that an old martial arts teacher used to use, who said, you get it by doing it. So you can read the books, you can learn the words, but if you don't step out into it without judgment, you don't really get it, and you don't really change yourself, if you want to think of it that way. And by definition, thereby the reality around you. So it's all very amorphous. I go back to, remember at Foundationals years ago, we put up on the board the big kind of bubble that was the space the creator created to allow all of this to happen. And that's what our function is. It's to learn, grow, and all of that involves sharing, caring, and the other words that we use, loving, et cetera, and then you can talk about whether when you transition, you leave this body, there's I wouldn't say judgment, I wouldn't even say evaluation, but there might be a review. Buddhists would say there's a review. Somebody Nick likes to, Dolores Cannon would say, there might be a review, and on the basis of what you have become, learned, and changed, and thereby changed this reality for, maybe you're off to a different experience, and that could perpetuate until it doesn't. Anyway, there's so much in this, it's hard to figure out where to start for me.
Thank you. Yeah. There very much is a review to speak about that one aspect of what you mentioned.
But it's not a judgment. This is what,
Correct. It
if
is.
you want to say, this is what the idol, what man and the church in its greed to control has added into the mix. You'll be judged. No, it's not even a pass-fail proposition. It's just, what'd you learn from the experience? Okay, well, there are more experiences. Let's go reconfigure yourself and a new reality and go learn more, because the creator is intensely, I would say, interested in learning about what all these realities can offer and create. I'm trying to meld
Correct.
a whole bunch of stuff together, which is pretty tricky.
I
But
believe you were very correct.
so we really ought to go forward in a very positive way. Any negativity is imposed, and of course it holds you back. And this is where we need each other. Pick each other up, help each other move forward, tell each other, it's not that big a deal. Just do it as honestly as you can, with as much sincerity as you can, transparency as you can, and things will change. Anyway.
The idea of judgment in the scriptures is not it actually says that judge ye not lest ye be judged by the same judgment that you use. This is speaking more to the decisions that you make about other people based upon your experiences, as opposed to what we consider judgment to be. Someone in a judicial position making a finding or coming to a decision about someone based upon the evidence that they have observed. That is not the scriptural understanding of judgment at all. It is the decisions that we make based upon the principles that we have experienced. And if the principles that you have experienced are the principles that you make your decisions about other people, then it is these principles that will be used with others are making decisions about you. Now, why is that so important? It's so important because these are the words that came from the mouth from the conceptual being called Jesus. It's important because what is being said by the writers of these allegories is that keep in mind the experiences that you have within the confines of your environment may be totally different than another's experiences within their environment. And when you make judgment calls or when you make decisions about what you think of them or what they should or should not be doing based upon your experience in your environment, it is totally different than theirs. Yet you will be judged by what you decisions about you will be made in the same way, which means that you are in control of your interactive destiny with humanity. And if you want to be one with the Creator and one with humanity by virtue of being in a position to help them along their journey, then you make no decisions about them that is based upon your environment. You look at the variables in their lives and you talk to them about it, which means that it's another way of saying you deal with people where you find them as opposed to trying to deal with them based on where you find yourself, because that is totally two different places. Does that make sense? Do you understand? Any questions about that?
I'm glad you said that, Pastor, because I've said it many times about somebody, and what's how you just treated me, it's gonna come back to you. But now that I've always wondered about that, but I'm glad you explained that the way you did, and I appreciate that. Because, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
This is Janice. I've noticed in another example of what you're talking about, over time, I've become more accepting, excuse me, of my size, my body, how I look, etc. And I can always tell that I might be drifting a little bit off track if I look at other women and I judge how they look. And it's always a reflection of how I'm feeling about myself. That same judgment that I extend towards other people, it's just a reflection. And I've seen it in other people as well. You know, if they're unhappy about something, you know, a certain way that they appear, they'll often judge other people for that. And it may sound kind of shallow, but I think it's a great example.
It may sound shallow, but it's also dangerous because you lose sight of who you really are when you make those kinds of decisions about other people based upon your circumstances and not theirs. Thank you.
Right.
Judge not, lest ye be judged. The thing you think you are judging is actually your own self.
It's interesting how really hard that is to let go because we keep bringing it up, isn't it? So, but I was thinking something a little different. I don't know, just to throw it out before we get off. I'm now a grandfather for the first time ever. My wife and Audrey and I are grandparents. Well, it takes me back to when our sons were young. And I remember one of them asking me when he was going to bed, "Dad, am I going to die?" And there I am with a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, face to face, loving him, wanting to answer honestly, etc. So it's almost like this whole notion of the idea of the child in you, which is not immature or anything. It's open, transparent, innocent. And there he is looking at me with wide eyes, like, and so I can either give him a clever answer, or I can tell him, what I know and what I don't know. But I kind of translate a lot of this that we've been talking about today. If you take it back to something like that, explaining it to someone else who's asking you to really help them understand, you need to find a simple way to do it. And you wouldn't waste time with all the things that aren't. You just talk about the core of what you understand. And I think if you can do that exercise for yourself, I hope this is making sense, you can move yourself forward if you want in call it your understanding of the truths of all of this. And you wouldn't tell your child about, well, you know, some people will say you go to hell, but I don't believe that. You wouldn't fill their head full of the, it's not going to be this way kind of thing. Just tell them what is, what you understand, the truth of what you understand. And if you can tell yourself that, wow, haven't we moved along pretty well? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you can only do the best you can do. But I think that is the ideal, is not to enforce any particular belief, but give the framework for understanding, and then allow your children or whoever it is you're teaching to learn how to know a thing for themselves. And that's the only real way true learning and understanding takes place. The rest of it is sort of a guiding framework.
Thank you, sir. I think that this is probably a good place to stop until tomorrow evening, because a lot has been said today. There's a lot to digest, and I suggest that, if possible, you listen to this again. That's the purpose of our uploading them to the sessions to YouTube. So at this point, unless there are other questions or comments, I thank you guys for being on today, and your questions, your energy, your presence always helps. Any questions or comments before we bid each other bye for now? Thank you thank you, Nick, for facilitating, and thank all of you for participating. And we will talk tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Bye now.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick.